Clark. Please help me welcome Dr. Young. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I am assuming that you can all hear me fine. I see that you are enjoying lunch on a white tablecloth, so very good. And thank you, President Bonnie, for inviting me to participate at the Eastern Connecticut Association of Realtors. I have visited there, I think, at least 2 times. Certainly a lovely area. I don't know how it is in the winter, but it's a very nice, peaceful area where you are. The housing market has certainly surprised during this challenging pandemic period. The pandemic, once in a hopefully multiple generation event, despite the economic uncertainty in the initial months and still ongoing challenges related to the COVID spread, the housing market has done fantastically well. Now, it is no longer the superheated condition, but it is still holding on and doing better than the pre-pandemic activity. Let me put the PowerPoint slide on. And also, since you have knives and forks, you don't have to jot down any notes. The session is being recorded. And also, if you want to use 1 or 2 PowerPoint slides, you are most welcome to use whether with the clients or to share with other agents. So let me put the screen, put it on the screen. Okay. All right, so here we are. So let me first start with non-housing data, which is quite striking. This is the number of birth certificate and number of death certificate issued within the United States. Blue line shows the birth certificate. And what it shows is that in a typical year, there's about 4 million people born in the US. 4 million people. But note how it has trended down in the past 12 months. If you remember the early months of the lockdown, we're all stuck at home. And some people were commenting, well, I think everyone will make babies. That's what will happen. But the reality is that when there is a time of economic uncertainty, and also health challenges, getting pregnant, all the other uncertainty related to it, there is a less live birth. It happened during the Great Depression in the 1930s. You can talk to your grandparents and what happened in the 1930s. And they will also say, the birth rate declined during economic uncertainty. So it followed that same trend again. What is unusual in this chart is the red line, the number of deaths. So typically there's about 2.5 million people who die each year. This is accounting for everything. Automobile accident, heart attack, drug overdose, and certainly in the past 12 months, past 18 months, the COVID impact. So you see the red line really rising such that now the 2 lines essentially cross. This would imply that in the US, we will not have any population growth in the US. But we actually do have population growth in the US because we have people born internationally coming over. Now, for legal immigrants, I think Americans are very welcoming of legal immigrants, from Ireland, from Vietnam and other places. You follow the rules, so you are in line and you come to the country, all accepting. We have some Afghan refugees coming into the country. You can say they help out America. So in the current difficult circumstance in Afghanistan, well, maybe they have validity to come to the US. What we are uncomfortable is illegal immigration in the southern border. We all know that there is some degree of illegal immigration that's occurring, but it has really blossomed in the past year, and we know what's going on today in the part. So however you view the southern border immigration, illegal immigration, the reality is that in the US, just within the US, we have no population growth currently. All the population growth is due to the immigration, refugees status. The census actually believes, and I think this is before taking account of the COVID virus, is that population will steadily increase. And this is an important factor for supporting real estate because we need to have population increases. Otherwise, you have vacant property after vacant property. We sometimes see that in some cities in the US. For example, Youngstown, Ohio, steel factory shuts down, no job, people leave. And in the process, there is a massive vacant properties just sitting with a home prices being less than $100,000. But in the US overall, we have the population growth. Maybe this COVID situation, let's hope that is out under control. And very good to see in you that you are meeting in person. Some sense of getting back to normal. So I'm glad to see people are meeting in person. But once this is out of the way, we should have the normal population growth in the US, and then you see the steady housing demand that occurred. Now, let me turn to the good news of the housing sector as to what occurred. The horizontal red bar is in essence pre-pandemic home sales activity. So before that terrible virus arrived in the US shores, home sales were moving along, nothing meaningful, little increase, little decrease. Then the sudden big swings. Lockdown, home sales plunge. And of course, we were all concerned about what's going to happen to the business activity, income. There was a massive stimulus package. And then once the economy reopened, huge surge of home sales activity, not only recovering back up to pre-pandemic, but going way beyond because consumers were eyeballing record low mortgage rates. Furthermore, for some people who had the ability to go to the suburbs or away from big cities, because thinking was, if you live in densely populated areas like New York City or Boston, you want to get away because virus will transmit more easily when there's more people. So people wanted to get away. So that was also another impact, positive impact for home sales out in the suburbs, smaller towns. But the surge is over now. Home sales are coming down. But note that it is still above pre-pandemic. So it's settling down in a nice place above pre-pandemic after the surge, but that multiple offers, frantic, frenzy activity days appears to be winding down. If we look at the mortgage applications to buy a home, because most people who buy a home need to take out a mortgage, the line shows similar. So again, the red line is my best estimate of pre-pandemic. It's a little volatile, so I tried to put it best as I could. It plunged during the lockdown. It surged post-lockdown period. Then it softened, but now at least in the latest data, it's coming back up to the pre-pandemic conditions. But the home sales is a little more than mortgage applications. Home sales is also driven by people who are buying without mortgage, cash. And cash has remained elevated throughout 2021. Now, part of the reason could be that some people got lucky on cryptocurrency. After in 1 year, huge gain, they want to cash out. Other people who with a large investment portfolio, well, the stock market has been hitting record highs aside from recent jitter correction conditions. So maybe people use that as for all cash transaction. But another source of cash is people are becoming very creative. They're saying multiple offers. Only way to stand out in a multiple offer is to say, look, I have all cash, no mortgage contingency. Whether they're temporarily borrowing money from family members, friends, but they're scraping up cash and making a cash offer in order to win the bid. So cash transaction has been elevated. So home sales have been actually doing better than the mortgage application. Now, recent development, at least nationwide, and I'm trying to assess which local market is facing this situation more than others. So I cannot really say about Eastern Connecticut market, whether you are following this trend, is that we are seeing huge increases in single family rents. I am not talking about the investor property purchase. I'm looking at a property that is for rent. And you say, come, here's a single family home, $1,200 per month. But 5 people show up and then they are bidding among each other and say, $1,200, well, I will pay you much more than that. Please choose me. So we are seeing a rents rising strongly because the rental demand has suddenly picked up. Now note that housing demand has softened a bit while the rental demand is picking up. And you may say those are the same people. People who could not buy are now beginning to rent or saying time out. I want to gain income over the next 12 months before going back to the home buying market. But the rental demand remains very, very strong, especially in the suburbs, especially the single family properties. And apartment vacancy rates are also trending low. So again, indicating that rental demand remaining very, very strong in the current environment. So why is the rental demand strong? Well, the answer is home prices have increased so much that people are simply priced out. It's not that somehow people have lost the American dream of ownership. They still would like to buy, but they are priced out. So I am showing three markets. So Eastern Connecticut market is the lower graph because you are more affordable. So you see the line on the bottom showing that, well, you had a foreclosure crisis about 15 years ago, prices declined, stabilized, and now recently reaching a new high. But if you look at New York City or Boston, I mean, it is turning upward as well. I mean, they experienced some price decline, but sharply upward. Note that the gap between Eastern Connecticut versus Boston and New York City. When I say New York City, this is not Manhattan. This is greater metro market, Northern Jersey suburbs, New York State suburbs, Long Island, all that part. So you see that the median prices are much higher. So people are seeking affordability. They would want to go into places like Eastern Connecticut, especially those office workers who have the flexibility to work from home. Beautiful skylines in Manhattan, but it's essentially empty buildings because people are working from home. And some people may be wondering, why are they so close to the city when they can have a mansion, large size home out in the Eastern Connecticut? So you may begin to see this type of trend. And of course, you are close to Boston as well. So you may be getting some Boston residents moving in. So right now there's a price increases. Some people calling timeout. I cannot buy. I want to wait 1 year to buy. But in the meantime, the rental demand remaining very, very strong. Because of the home price increases, sharp upturn, the total real estate valuation across the country, according to the Federal Reserve, according to the federal government, is at a record high, which is reflected in the green line, just record high asset valuation. For some people who are concerned that price increases have been too fast, too quickly, and we may be in for a correction, I would say don't worry, because there is a solid buffer zone currently. It's not like back in 2006, 2007 during subprime lending when the mortgage balance was rising. See how the mortgage balance, the red line was rising during the subprime lending days? But if you look at the red line, it has not really risen at all. So there is a sizable buffer room that will not cause any financial market implosion because somehow the housing market will cause that. I don't think home prices will decline. I hope that it moderates a bit, but I don't think it will decline. But hypothetically, if it was to decline, there's still plenty of buffer room to absorb those price declines, the gap between the green and the red. Given that first-time buyers who got priced out, I mean, they would welcome any price decline and just jump into the market as a second chance opportunity. I don't think prices will decline. So hopefully the first-time buyers can save up the money, have their income grow, so they will be in a better position next year. But right now, the financial market related to housing is in a solid foundation. Nothing about any financial market implosion coming from housing. The chart that realtors find the most interesting, most compelling to share with clients is this chart. Typical homeowner versus typical renters, the wealth difference. There's always an exception, but this is the typical homeowner having $297,000 in wealth. Everything the person has, savings account, retirement funds, and of course, housing wealth. Housing wealth is a big driver. So given the price increases, nearly $300,000 in wealth for a typical homeowner. While for the renters, they're just scraping by. I mean, it's not that much because without that housing, without that home price growth, they're not participating in this wealth. Also, some years it can be difficult, just as the Connecticut went through the foreclosure crisis, the price declines. But this is also a testament that long-term home ownership will always provide benefit over the long term. So if I can go back to the prior graph, so what this chart shows is that a typical home price in Eastern Connecticut in the year 2000 was about $150,000. So now it's essentially double that price. So, this is a long-term showing a good growth. The reason for strong price increase, as we know, is lack of inventory. Lack of inventory leading to multiple offers leading to prices rising very, very fast. But I think the worst in inventory, we may be beginning to turn the corner. I would say, the data still say there's fewer inventory today compared to 1 year ago. But if one looks at fresh new listings that's coming out, it's actually beginning to show slightly higher than what it was 1 year ago. And I think by December period, we will begin to see year-over-year gains in inventory. And certainly spring buying season of next year, you will say spring 2022. We have more choices for consumers, more listings compared to spring of 2021. So I think we are beginning to turn the corner on the inventory. And the reason why we are turning the corner on the inventory is that the builders are beginning to ramp up. This is housing starts, number of new home construction. Some years they're above average, other years it's below average. Housing sector is cyclical, up and down. If you are having a good year, don't spend all that income. Just in case, hold it for rainy days. But it shows some cycles. But look what has happened from about 2007, below average, then another year of below average. In fact, it's at 13 straight years of below average. And the cumulative effect of this underproduction for multiple years is we don't have homes for sale. That's why there's an inventory shortage, not only in your area. You go to Boston, you go to New Hampshire, Long Island, everywhere across the country, there is an inventory shortage. But the final two red bar is my forecast for new home construction, finally breaking higher. And that is why we will steadily see improvement in inventory. And spring of next year, you will say, yes, we have a little more inventory in 2022 versus 2021. So we are beginning to turn the corner. Let me now turn towards mortgage rates forecast. And the news is not good. The green line is Federal Reserve Fed funds rate, today at 0. That interest rate is not for you and me, it's for the banking system, 0% interest rate. The consumer interest rate is the red line. That's the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Because Federal Reserve cut their interest rate, the green line, the red line steadily declined, which was one of the sources for that surge in home sales late last year. But the mortgage rate is no longer declining, it's sort of stuck. I mean, it's very favorable, 3% mortgage rate. I mean, these are amazingly low mortgage rate. But this period is coming to an end. I cannot say exact timing, but December of this year will be slightly higher. And in 2022, even higher than that. So overall direction of the mortgage rate will be higher interest rate, with the first one coming as something called taper tantrum. And what do I mean by taper tantrum? Well, here it is. Federal Reserve currently, or let me actually back it up. Your client got a mortgage from Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or local mortgage broker. But the reason why your client got that mortgage is that the lender knows they can sell it to Fannie and Freddie for the most part. And the Fannie and Freddie has been selling their mortgages over to the Federal Reserve. So this is the Federal Reserve purchases of mortgage-backed securities, MBS. But the Federal Reserve said yesterday they will stop buying or slow the pace of mortgage purchases which means that Fannie and Freddie has to find other buyers. Where do they find the other buyers? Well, it could be the Chinese government. It could be German mutual fund. It could be Wall Street or Connecticut teachers pension fund. But they have to find other buyers. But in the process, they have to offer higher interest rate to find the other buyers. And that higher interest rate will filter into the consumers, so the mortgage rate will be a little higher. Second reason for higher mortgage rates. Sometime next year, Federal Reserve will raise their interest rate, currently at 0, and they will raise it. Again, that interest rate is not for you and me, but it impacts overall mortgage rate direction. So Federal Reserve will raise it, and that will lead to even higher mortgage rates. Another negative is that currently Congress is debating on the size of this massive spending bill. Everything from infrastructure spending, child care credit, community college education, all that part. But it's not a free lunch. And part of the raising of the funding for those is, raising the taxes, but also there's the one component inside which say they will try to raise G fees. G fees are guaranteed fees that Fannie and Freddie charges to your mortgage broker. So when your mortgage broker is selling those mortgages, they have to pay additional $200 or $300 or $400. I'm not sure what the amount will be. But that also means it's going to be passed over to the consumers. So taking out a mortgage is going to be a little more expensive. But one positive development going into 2022 is that looks like Fannie and Freddie will consider rental payment history as part of the qualifying criteria. We have been advocating, and NAR has been advocating, if someone is demonstrating paying paying rents on time every month, that should be a positive point, showing financial responsibility. And therefore, they should have a better chance of getting the mortgage. So people who are not paying rent, the rental eviction moratorium, for people who are in that situation, we feel for them. But there are also people who are abusing the system, and NAR fought to say, yeah, it doesn't make sense. Supreme Court decided to say the eviction moratorium was unconstitutional. What we want is, there's plenty of stimulus money. There's plenty of money in the Connecticut Housing Fund where they receive the federal money for rental subsidy. So people who are in that situation, they should be paying that money to the housing provider. That would make more sense. But for people who are making rental payment on time, at least that should be positive attribute, and that will make qualifying for the mortgage a little easier in 2022, even though the mortgage rates will be higher. Now, the question is, why is the Federal Reserve changing their monetary policy stance? Why are they thinking of raising interest rates? And the reason is inflation is getting out of hand. Inflation is running high. Normally, 2%, 3% inflation would be considered fine, but now it's running consistently at 5%. What's rising? Well, if we look at the individual components, gasoline prices way up from 1 year ago. And we know that the realtors drive far more than general population. So this is hurting realtors. Bacon, if you like bacon, tough luck, expensive. Used car prices, much higher. Why? There's not enough inventory because there is a computer chip shortage in building new car. So there's only slow trickle of new car coming onto the market. And therefore, people who need a car immediately, they have to go to the used car market, and there's not enough. Appliances. Your clients are celebrating the new home purchase. Now they want to buy a refrigerator or laundry machine. Well, very expensive. Clothes prices up 5%. If you're a vegetarian, fruit and vegetables, at least that's not rising. So maybe you can shift away from meat and go into fruit and veggies, and then you'll be fine. Rents, according to the government, they're saying the government rents data is rising 2%. I think this is wrong, or either that or government data is lagging. It takes time because many private sector data, apartment sector data is showing much faster rent growth. College tuition, maybe universities felt guilty about online courses last year, so they're not really raising tuition this year for the most part. I guess some colleges and universities are, but many are also barely raising tuition. So that is why Federal Reserve is considering raising interest rate because inflation is getting out of hand. Now let me turn to the job market. So this is the total number of jobs in America, people who are working. Lockdown, massive job cuts. But since the low point, you see steady jobs recovery. But we are not back up to normal yet, not back up to the pre-pandemic. If we look at state-by-state comparison, it looks like the following. New England states, very small. Well, that's where America started, I guess, and then therefore, trying to remember Rogers, who was from Boston and went to Providence and created Rhode Island and so forth. So anyway, all the states in New England states are very small size. So I put Connecticut out on the sort of the letter column with a big arrow. So Connecticut is down 4.6% from 1 year ago, jobs. New York is down 7.9%. So the darker shaded blue area is showing larger job cuts or slow recovery. Light color is showing slight decline from pre-pandemic. Orange, 3 states are the only states, Idaho, Utah, and Arizona, the only states with more jobs today compared to pre-pandemic. So there's some variation between the states, but Connecticut down 4.6%. It's little larger decline than national average. Just, you are doing better than New York, and Massachusetts is down 5.3%. So you are doing better than Massachusetts, but 4.6%. So it's going to take some time to get back up to pre-pandemic conditions. So job market is not yet back up to normal, but we all know about this situation. Staff shortage, especially at hotels, restaurants, small businesses. Job openings are at a record high, massive number of help wanted signs. Yet people are not taking those jobs. Maybe people consider that to be low wage industry jobs and they're waiting for something better. But right now the job openings are at a record high, even though we're not back to normal in terms of total jobs. Let me wrap it up with a forecast. So the forecast is that in 2021, home sales will be meaningfully higher compared to last year. Last year, you had that surge. This year is coming down a bit. So why is the home sales higher in 2021? And the answer is there is 12 months of activity. Back in 2020, there was a lockdown. There was a disruption. So that's why overall home sales in 2021 will be higher when you tally up the number, even though it's no longer at that surge condition. 2022, I see only a mild decline because jobs will be created, job creation continues, but the mortgage rate will be a little bit higher, and that's going to bring the sales down somewhat. But I think it will still be above 2020 or 2019 period. So overall, home sales looks to be in a good condition. And one interesting trend to, I guess, monitor during this pandemic or silver lining of this pandemic, this ugly virus, but there's one silver lining is work from home flexibility. Even after we say all clear, back to normal life, I don't think people will go back to offices, at least not 5 days a week, maybe 2 days a week, 1 day a week, or some flexibility. That means commuting is not that important. Why have that small condominium near New York City paying exorbitant price when one can have a very nice home with a backyard in Eastern Connecticut? So I believe that this will really benefit affordable markets out in the suburbs, smaller towns, away from big cities. And one other trend that we are seeing is vacation home sales are really rising. And then the reasoning is the same reasoning, that work from home can be work from vacation home. So people are really beginning to sense that this work from home flexibility is real, even after all clear sign is given. I think there's many office workers will never return to what they experienced previously with rush hour traffic jam and such. And I think you will be the beneficiaries of that trend that is steadily developing. So thank you very much for giving me time to share some of my thoughts, albeit virtually. And yeah, I've been to Eastern Connecticut many times. But thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it back over to President Bonnie.
Lawrence, will you take a few questions?
Sure, I will take a couple
Okay.
of.
Anybody have this great opportunity to ask a brilliant economist some questions? Hold on.
Doctor, in that graph that you had, Connecticut against Boston and New York, which line was Boston and which line was New York?
So yeah, let me actually go back to the chart. Good question.
It was red, blue, and green. It looked green from over there.
So I will send a note because somehow both looks very similar. New York City Metro and the Boston Metro right now, one was above others, and then there was now the other is higher. But I will send that note to you, and then Susie can share that information. I just need to look into my database. But thank you for that question.
Thank you. Anybody? Oh, here we go.
The housing or the eviction moratorium for renters is due to expire. How do you see that playing out?
The eviction moratorium, again, for people who are in need, there should be sufficient housing funds, rental subsidy available from state of Connecticut. So it's a distribution problem. And you mentioned, interestingly, it's going to end soon because I live in Virginia and it's already ended. So many states have already ended, but on top of the federal eviction moratorium, I think some states like Connecticut put additional few months to it. I would say that first is that some housing providers had a bad experience on this, and they may say, no, I give it up, and they're going to list the property onto the market. Furthermore, the mortgage forbearance program, the homeowners who have not been paying their mortgages because of the federal program, now that program is winding down, so they may also need to put their home on the market. Now, given the price increases, it doesn't have to be short sales or distress sales. It can simply be normal sales. And given that we have an inventory shortage, any increase in inventory, I believe from consumers' perspective, will be welcome, whether it is a real estate investors who want to buy the property or the first-time buyers. So in terms of the absorption of this new listings coming onto the market, I don't see it causing any price decline or foreclosure mess. It's going to be absorbed quickly.
Okay, great. Hold on. We have another question over here.
The 3 states that had an increase in jobs, what did they do different from all the other states that didn't have an increase?
Well, first, they are close to California. That helps because many Californians are leaving because housing unaffordability. I mean, there's a lot of reasons behind it, but if you look at the deep reasoning as to why Californians are leaving, they just simply cannot afford to live in California, very expensive, so they're leaving. And the other reasoning, I would say, those 3 states had a fairly lax lockdown, meaning that even during the few weeks where there was a lockdown, business could still remain open. People need to go buy masks and so forth to pick up. But once, after a couple of months, they reopened the economy and they said everything normal, just virus is dangerous out there, but we're not going to control it. It's up to you. You take the risk on how you want to do. So they really did not have a true lockdown. And then, New England states, I would say, relatively speaking, had all the governors in New England states had a more stricter lockdown. But even as the economy was reopening, they still had some more restriction, even with the economy reopening.
Have you given consideration to what's going to be happening in 23 and maybe 24?
Many things could happen, but overall, deep long-term driver for housing is the population growth. And we are in the unique situation where overall number of birth and death matches up. But hopefully, things begin to return to normal where the birth rate exceeds the death rate. So that will be the driver of the housing. And there's always a little fluctuation around the long-term trend. So the long-term trend will be steady, 3% increase in home sales at that point. But there will be fluctuation depending upon what happens to the mortgage rates. And one thing that has happened on Connecticut over the past 20, 30 years is that Connecticut was always viewed as the wealthiest country, the wealthiest state in America. Always been that status. But in the past 20 years, there's more people leaving Connecticut than people moving in. Even to the nearby states of Massachusetts and New York. And consequently, Connecticut was in a very one of the very few states, Illinois and West Virginia being other, where there was actual population losses even during good economic times. Now, what are the reasons? You can debate that issues with the Connecticut legislatures, governors, but Connecticut was one of the few states to actually lose population even during good economic times before the pandemic.
Anybody else? Okay, our state president, Carol Christensen, has a question.
Hi, Dr. Yoon. We haven't seen a lot of foreclosures during the pandemic. So long range, how do you think foreclosures being reintroduced to the market is going to change your forecast in the future?
The difficult time of 15 years ago was that people took out a bad mortgage, then there was a job losses along with it. So you had the property coming onto the market, distressed properties, and no one to buy because people are losing jobs. Today, we are in a job creating environment. Some would be first-time buyers. They want to buy, but they're priced out. So in other words, there are buyers on the sideline today ready to jump in if there is a foreclosures, a distressed property coming onto the market. So I don't see distressed property as being a major portion of overall home sales. We had the latest housing statistics come out yesterday. It was less than 1% of all transactions were classified as foreclosure or short sales.
That's good. Any more questions? Well, thank you so very much, Dr. Young. We really, really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Okay, have a wonderful day, everyone.